Good morning. It's 9:31, and I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Historical Architectural Preservation Board. And I'd like to call the roll call to see who's here, starting with you.
Betsy Parity-Kesey, member at large.
Candace Johnson, member at large.
Hank Santowski, member at large.
Zach Birch. And Barry O'Brien, acting chairman today.
I'm Ray Bellows, zoning manager.
Are there any additions to this month's meeting?
I have no changes to the agenda.
Excellent. Has everyone read the last minutes of the last meeting?
Yeah, I'll move approval of the minutes.
All righty. Barry O'Brien.
So you take a vote.
Oh, I'd like to take a vote to approve the minutes of the last month's meeting.
I move that we accept the last month's meeting notes.
I also approve. Aye.
Last month's minutes have been approved. Next will be approval of minutes. Old business, a Rosemary Cemetery update. Oh, Amanda's not here.
Yeah, Ray Bellows for the record. Amanda at the last meeting indicated that she was now in a better position to further the research on that. Unfortunately, she's not here today to give you an update.
Thank you, Mr. Bellows. New business, welcome new members.
Yeah, I think it's a great. Now we're fully with 7-member preservation board. We always need 4 members for a quorum. And we do try to reach out before the meeting to make sure we have a quorum so you don't end up coming down here only to find the meeting canceled. We meet on the 3rd Friday of each month at 9:30. That's a standard time unless the preservation board takes a vote to pick another time or date. We do sometimes take breaks for summer break. That has happened throughout. Did everybody get a copy of the preservation board list of members? If we not, we'll email them the contact list.
And would the new members like to make any welcoming comments?
Your red light on. I don't know. There you go. I think.
Technically, this is my 3rd meeting, but I'm pleased to be here.
I'm someone with a background in nonprofit administration, and I appreciate the chance to volunteer and be on this board and be aware of what's going on. So,
My name is Hank Santowski. Probably a Florida resident now, 10 years. First 5 as a snowbird. Second 5 as a full-time Collier County resident. Glad to be here. I live in Verona Walk, and my duties in Verona Walk, in addition to many ad hoc committees, I was the past chairman of the Architectural Control Committee for 2.5 years. And as such, was responsible for all approval of application that came before our committee with reference to exterior construction, landscaping, as well as other items. And we generally would do about 600 applications on the average a year. So we were a very active committee in that particular sense. So we did get this, well, I guess our motto was we don't like to say no. And we try to rationalize everything and then do what we had to do to make it right for the homeowner. Plus, we had 1,920 homes in Verona. And yeah, close to about 1,000 acres. So it was quite an undertaking, but thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's where I thought maybe I can help adjust here and come along with the preservation board, because I always had an interest in preservation. So I figured, well, maybe it'll be a good fit. So, squeeze me in, gentlemen and ladies.
Where are you originally from?
New York,
I thought I
by way of
heard a
Brooklyn.
little New York in there.
But do I have an accent? People say I have an accent. I don't know. But yeah, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. Moved to Queens, natural progression, then to Long Island, where I raised our two, and then to Florida. Yes, correct. So glad to be here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for the both of you for joining our group, and we look forward to your input.
Barry, could I ask you for your little history and background? I mean, because they don't know it.
Sure. I'm originally from Warwick, Rhode Island. I was on the Historic District Commission up there 16 years, and we were a busy group too. We had close to 19 houses in our overlays. We had 3 villages, and one of them, Patuxent Village, 89% of the houses were 100 to 240 years old. And that was a busy one. Oh, yeah. And then we had 2 more where the average age of the houses was 100 years to 110 years old. And the third one was the same way. Yeah, Warwick is a unique city. Everyone speaks about the Boston Tea Party where they tossed the tea into the harbor, but the company that brought it over, they got reimbursed by Lloyd's of London, versus Warwick, Rhode Island in 1774, where a ship from the king came up into the cove, and the colonialists got so angry, they burnt the ship to the ground. And it's celebrated every year in Warwick, Rhode Island. It's called the Burning of the Gaspee. And I was on that committee too, and I used to do Rev War reenacting. So it was pretty neat. And we wound up down here. My daughter moved down here 15 years ago, and her husband is a native to Golden Gate Estates. And we wound up down here because I had pneumonia so bad, the doctors told my wife, don't be surprised if he drops dead. So my wife said, when I was 63, I think it's time to move to Florida because we got a 8-year-old granddaughter too. So.
Reenacting?
Oh yeah,
You're
I
a
did
a
Rev War
reenact-
reenacting.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, up in New England, it's huge. We do we did battle reenactments, parades.
You'll have your costume?
No, I gave it to another guy because to buy the uniform is $900. So I saved the guy $900.
Oh, all right.
And I kept my muskets. I had 2 muskets, a 69 caliber and a 74 caliber. But I gave those to another friend. I had a flintlock pistol. I gave that to another friend. It was pretty neat. I always get a kick out of this when they say, oh my gosh, must have been great living back then. On a cold, misty day, you go out hunting. The powder never works because of the dampness and everything. But
In the war.
yeah, so yeah. And that's one of the first in the battle in 1775 was the first lawsuits brought against the Continental Congress, because when they were driving the British back from Concord, musket balls struck houses.
Oh, wow.
And they got so angry, they said, hello, I'm going to write you a letter. I got damage. I want reimbursement. And it's documented in the Massachusetts Historical Society, the first lawsuits brought against the Continental Congress. I could go on
remember-
for like 7 hours.
I remember seeing by musket balls
Oh,
or
yeah.
cannonballs in Yorktown,
Oh, yeah.
when we visited there. So thank you for the wonderful background. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Betsy, do you want to give your the new members?
My background, originally grew up in Oklahoma and moved here with my husband in 1989. And I was interested in genealogy and history of how people lived. And so my husband's computer expertise in graphics layout. We have published 7 books, historical, fiction and nonfiction books on Marco Island that are in the museum down there. And yeah, and I headed up the reenactors 25 years ago with costumes, and we recreate personalities, you know, of our local history, as well as for 7 years we did the president's wives, the presidents on February the 14th, the President's Day. And since we couldn't find men reenactors, we did women and did the presidents through the eyes of their wives, which was really interesting. And so we, you know, eventually each of the actors have recreated their own scripts. So we have a variety of personalities that are on stage, and it's a wonderful way to learn history, as you know, being a reenactor with your authentic costume. We're just theatrical people over here. But yes, and I followed Art Lee onto this board, and I do not remember. I thought I was going to be serving on the board with him, and I replaced him. So I don't remember what year that was. But it was way back. Yeah. So I'm a dinosaur here on this board. And we know that our, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Zach.
Matt.
Zachary.
Zachary. Okay. Is with the airport.
Yes,
And-
I'm Zach Birch. I'm the communications manager for the airport. I've not taken part in any ship burnings. No,
It
but
sounds like a great tradition. I wish we had one.
no, so I'm the communications manager for the airport. Before that, I worked for the Department of Transportation and for the Florida legislature in different roles. And yeah, just always been interested in history and archaeology, and no real professional background in it, but certainly interested. And before I lived here, and I've lived here since I was 10 years old. But before that, I grew up in Virginia, and we did go to Civil War reenactments, which is a bigger thing maybe down there than in New England. But yeah, it's always been interesting, and you know, kind of helps tell the story.
I was just all ready to sit and talk for hours on it about everybody's different things. Review of project and activity lodge. Does anybody have any comments about that? Oh, sure. Mr. Finn would like to address the Rosemary Cemetery, please.
Yeah, I got a message via Skype from Amanda Townsend. Just an update. She got caught up in some things at the office, so she can't make the HAPB meeting. With respect to Rosemary Cemetery, can you let the board know that the title work has been received and is being reviewed by Real Estate Services? And that Eagle Scout candidate Jonathan Rodriguez will be participating with me in the project. Thank you.
News from Amanda.
I'd also like to update, give an update on the historical guide booklets. We did receive those a few days ago. We received 48 boxes. You do have a copy of the new booklet. The only change really is the centennial emblem that's on the cover. But all the rest of it's the same as 2 years ago. So the museum stopped by yesterday. They took 12 boxes.
Nichols Museum. Yeah, and yes, and our new members should know that we are able to pick up
Yes.
these booklets and deliver them wherever.
Yes.
The hotels, the tourist centers, wherever they're used. So where people can pick them up.
Right. Yeah. So just let us know how many boxes you need and we'll give them to you.
Yes, the various historic societies in the county, we give boxes to those historic societies as well. And we also have made arrangements for deliveries to the Collier County Public Library System.
Good. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Finn.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Can we return for just one moment to Rosemary Cemetery? When we're talking about that, are we also talking about those additional 8 graves in front of the Lee Market? So we're talking about all of it.
Currently, Rosemary Cemetery is a locally designated historic site, but we also know that there are other cemeteries just slightly down the road a bit. One is called Plat W.
8 unmarked graves.
Yes.
Part there along.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And so before the county can initiate a historic designation of that, we need to know who owns the property and who, trying to figure out who was buried there. So that's part of what Amanda's doing with her research. I think these are probably just going to be unmarked burials that we don't know exactly who was there, but mostly those were probably workers of the trail, on the trail.
Also noticed in the notes that it said it may be of interest to people from the NAACP. Has there someone stepped forward, and is Amanda working with the representatives?
There were representatives attending this meeting in the past
Mhm.
and also some other private individual who understood that this was there and wanted to initiate the historic designation. I don't know how much contact Amanda has, but she met those individuals at this meeting.
And may I say that when she mentioned the Eagle Scout that she's working with, in your report, she said she was working with an Eagle Scout. Did I?
Jonathan Rodriguez will be participating with me in the project, and that's all she wrote.
Right. And do you know what that means about scouting?
Somewhat aware. It's his.
Okay,
It's
that-
his
that
project.
An Eagle
right?
Scout, to get your Eagle Scout, you have to choose a project, be accepted, work with the project to fruition, and that helps you become an Eagle Scout on your way up. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for a young man to work with this, and we wish him well. My son is an Eagle Scout, so he's we're very proud of that, and that goes on their resume for the rest of their life, that any place that they became an Eagle Scout. So thank you.
If we need anything or any assistance with the NAACP, I know Mr. Keys pretty well, the president of the Collier NAACP. Happy to work with him on making sure that they stay informed with what's going on, or if we need anything from them or any support, whatever. I'm sure they'll be happy to provide it, and I'm happy to help in any way that's necessary.
I think that would be great. We'll follow up with Amanda to see how much contact she's had. And maybe we should initiate that outreach even more if it seems to like we have lost a little bit of that communication.
Alrighty, any other comments about it? I see 2 people in the audience. Do you want to come and make a comment about anything pertaining to historic? Come on up. We'll even let you sit down too.
My name is Michael Brownlee. I'm the Records Management Liaison Officer for the county, among other duties. But I wanted to come and monitor this meeting in the spirit of understanding what the historical and the preservation part of this committee's role is. And to understand that from a records management perspective, and understanding that there's sometimes when it comes to the disposition of records, there's retention periods, but there's occasionally an item that gets considered for disposal, but unless it has archival value. So I'm trying to, in the learning process, try to understand archival value, and that's certainly a subjective thing. So that's the reason I'm here in an official capacity. I've been in Naples since '97. I'm interested in history just in general. I fancy myself as a former radio guy. Zach and I have talked about this from time to time as an audio historian. So, so that's my personal interest. I'd also like to introduce Angel Bates. She will be my backup for records management type functions. And so she's along as well. So that's why I'm here. And,
Mind explaining to me what the records management does?
well,
I mean,
we work for a state agency and we often have to respond to public record requests. So
uh-huh.
depending on types of records, like it'd be a permit.
like the minutes or
Well,
anything.
certainly in
Uh-huh.
all kinds of meeting minutes. We have to work with the courts, generally the custodian of those types of public records. But there's all kinds of records throughout the county for all the different divisions. And they have different retention periods depending on the type of document that it is. And it's the state that dictates that. But from time to time, we need to dispose of records, but not before their retention period is passed. Any kind of record, audio tapes, pictures, you know. And the other thing that also interests me too is our centennial is this year, as you know. So I was curious what kind of connection this board has with aspects of the centennial as well. Angel?
Hi, I'm Angel Bates. I do the public record requests with our communications department. And I am learning to be backup for Mr. Brownlee as far as record retention and working with the divisions in that aspect. Little background, I'm fairly new to Naples. I've been here for 4 years. I've been in Florida since 2009, originally in the St. Pete area, and have more of a higher education background. But I like the area. I don't do any reenactments, but I'm from Rockford, Illinois. We had the Rockford Peaches, so yay. That's kind of cool. But yeah, and my dad was an Eagle Scout, so there we go. Connection. So, guys, it's very nice to be here, and again, it's personal interest and excited to hear what you.
Well, sorry, I was just saying, I appreciate what you guys do, especially, I can't tell you how many times, we wish we had stuff from the 40s and 50s and things like that when, we have such great history, but if all of it gets thrown away because people didn't think it was important 10 years later, 100 years later, you don't have it anymore. So, I didn't, the rules and regulations weren't as tight back then, but as they are now. So hopefully, while sometimes it can be burdensome to keep some of that stuff, whatever, but I think in the long run, ultimately it'll be more beneficial because we just don't have a lot of that stuff. Whether we want it or the public wants it, it just doesn't exist anymore especially from those oldest days.
I want to mention besides that.
Thank you for presenting yourselves today.
Thank you. Didn't mean
I
to-
can say you guys are a vital cog of the county.
Sure.
Exactly.
I have just one question for you. I'm interested in the records before we were Collier County. I mean, because those are all in Fort Myers, and sometimes, you want to look up land records, like for the Olds family, where they lived on Marco Island. And I came here and they said, no, that's over there. And so do I have to go over there to get it? Or is there an easy way to request?
An easy way. Well, Angel, no, no, but that's actually something that it's a challenge for us all the time is to discover.
This is the ancient history of this county is part of being part of Lee, and those records are, I guess, still there, and I hope they don't throw them away because they're outdated. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have hanging in the county manager's office.
Yeah.
62nd county. But as far as finding them and organizing them, and when you say easy way, well, we try to make it as easy as possible for people.
Yeah, well, and everything with its digital age will become easier, I suppose. Thank you.
Any comments from the fellow members on anything? Here,
Were you gonna do a?
Yes.
let's give you a presentation.
Our new member presentation. Tim and I wanted to go into a little presentation and discussion, a general overview of the relationship between the Historic Preservation Board and Collier County government, and more specifically zoning and land development in Collier County. When a developer wants to rezone, say, 300 acres for mixed-use residential, commercial development, how does the county know that that's going to impact an archaeological site or historic structures within that property that they want to develop? So we have created, working with a consultant, to create a map showing areas, known archaeological sites, known historic structures that are listed on the Florida Master Site File and or have been designated historic by Collier County, as well as areas of what's called archaeological probability. There was a scientific study doing with soil borings, and this archaeologist firm that we hired created these maps. And as you can see on the screen, these maps show areas of archaeological probability in yellow. So if a rezone application came in and was in one of these areas of historic archaeological probability, they are required to provide, hire a certified archaeologist to do a cultural assessment of that property. And at the last meeting, we saw an example of that study that was brought to this preservation board. They also have the ability to ask for a waiver from doing those cultural assessments if the site has, say, been previously excavated for a quarry or something like that. There's no sense of spending money on archaeologists if the site has been damaged through other kind of construction activities. The idea is, before we take a rezone petition through the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners, we want to know if there are archaeological sites or any other historic structures. And if there are, what are the conditions that we want to impose upon that developer to protect archaeological or historic artifacts? So the report that we get from the archaeologists may have conditions to help protect these historic sites or archaeological sites. And we incorporate that into the recommendation to the Planning Commission. So our report that goes to the Planning Commission will have a summary of the Preservation Board findings and recommendations. You may agree with the consultant that the applicant hired, or you might have additional conditions you want to impose upon that. We'll forward all those recommendations to the Planning Commission. They will also deem whether they're appropriate or not. And then the final decision is all brought to the Board of County Commissioners, and they create an ordinance that contains all the conditions of approval, including preservation conditions. The next step in the development process, once the zoning has been entitled, is going through what we call a site development plan. The site development plan looks at the zoning approval and all the conditions. So they want to make sure that developers adhering to the conditions of approval. So when they see the plans being submitted, they make sure that they're staying out of any areas that were designated archaeologically sensitive, so we don't accidentally dig up those areas. We did have a situation where one developer failed to follow those directions, and they did excavate into a designated archaeological site, and there are penalties for that. And we try to make sure that our processes help protect these things. And one of the things that we came out of that one site is better marking of sites. So when they hire a company to come in and excavate the site for development, that they mark out those areas that are deemed either environmentally sensitive or archaeologically sensitive. So this is kind of a map. I don't know, Tim, do you want to go through some of the sites on there, or what?
Yeah, actually Candace and I were talking about this early on in the meeting. The Stewart Mining East Extension. So I'm over Immokalee right now on this map, so I'm just gonna go to what that project is. And we did recommend approval based on the archaeological assessment from that agent. So let me just zoom in and, well, let me,
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
And when we give approval, are we done with the process or is there any other follow-up? So the Stewart mine, it was approved.
it was approved. We had accepted all the findings in that report. And then we take that approval from HAPB and we incorporate that into the staff report. So what I did, since this isn't my project, it's another colleague of mine, Nancy. I gave her what was said at that meeting and she'll incorporate that into her staff report.
I think my question was more specifically, there were no archaeological or significant
Oh, there
findings
wasn't,
there.
no.
So I think that was my question is when that is found in the report, I understand you incorporate it into those next steps, but then are we done with it?
Yes, for the most part, there's no other process that requires it to come back to the preservation board. The way the code is written is at the first petition type that comes in. So usually that's at the stage of rezone. But say the property was rezoned previously back in, say, the 70s, before we had this process, the next step would be a site plan or plat. When that comes in, if there was no cultural assessment done earlier, then we require it at subsequent stages. But you only really see it once. Once those conditions are incorporated into development, then they go into the building phase.
Ma'am, it's 10 o'clock.
Try to stay for 5 more minutes. I
Yeah.
really want to hear this.
This is the site of that mining extension. So in this case, it was just in the historical archaeological probability area. They did have a choice between a waiver and a cultural assessment. In this case, they actually chose the cultural assessment. And they didn't find anything, so we recommended approval. So when we get a project, any project, a PUD rezone, a PUDA, we go through this process. We zoom in into the site and see if there is any. In this case, there's an historical probability area, which is yellow. But if this had been any further south, excuse me, just a minute.
We're losing our connection.
Yeah, it's just thinking.
While it's, I have a question, if that's all right. Is there just being fairly new, is there a definition of what's historic? Like, is it a time frame more than so many years old, or it has to be significant, even though it's old, it may not be significant? I'm not 100% sure.
For the record, Ray Bullis, the Collier County Land Development Code, which contains all the unified development regulations, there's what we call a zoning overlay dealing with historic preservation. And within there, it contains all the definitions and criteria for what is deemed historic. And we can forward you that information if we haven't already. It's basically spells out that historic structures can be deemed historic. I think it's 50 years or more.
Yeah, I was just curious, and if you could, that'd be great, just at
Yeah.
some point. But because I mean, as we get now, I mean, something like a stucco house from the 70s is it historic? I mean, it's probably not right now. 100 years from now, it might be. But so I just didn't know if there was some sort of definition beyond just being old.
Well, there's like 6 or 7 criteria to be designated historic by the Board of County Commissioners, and those are if there's lands or structures associated with somebody deemed have important characters, such as one of the founding people who founded Collier County. They, structures associated with that could be deemed historic. Somebody, or if there's an architectural design or style that is unique, that those could be historic. Certainly archaeological sites, they do an archaeological study and it turns out it's a Calusa type of burial mound, or then those are sites we would want to protect. But our code spells out all that criteria and we'll forward that over to you all.
Going back to my example, if the mining had incorporated the area to the south of Quinn Road, you'll notice 2 stars. Yeah. Yeah, you'll notice 2 stars here. Let me zoom in.
Is that right? CR
These are historic structures because.
structures?
Yeah, you'll notice the stars, and that indicates a historic structure.
And they're designated with a Florida master site file number. So detailed information on how that structure is deemed historic is on that Florida master file. So you can cross-reference that number to find out from the state what exactly that is. The county staff also has copies of a lot of the Florida master file numbers, so we could look it up too and tell you what that structure is.
Is this tool, is this a public tool or is this just something the staff has?
This is a staff controlled document. The Florida master site file information is in the Florida Bureau of Historic Preservation, they want these local governments to protect the information for especially archaeological sites. They're afraid that there will be people wanting to dig up archaeological sites. So we don't publish this for anybody to go in and look at. But when a builder or developer's building, they coordinate with Tim and myself when we tell them you're in this area, you need to hire an archaeologist. And so we work with the builder developer early on and tell them, hey, you're in an area of archaeological probability or there are historic structures on the site. You need to hire an archaeologist or an historic architect to work with you to help protect those buildings or archaeological artifacts.
Have to be declared historic structures or,
Well, there's
I mean-
several layers of historic designations
Yeah.
and many sites are just listed as having historic qualities, but have not been designated by the county commission as historic or listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So if something is designated or listed on the Florida Master Site File as having historic significance, the next step would be to have it locally designated by the Board of County Commissioners. Once it's locally designated, it's protected. Yeah,
so it's not really protected until that
it's
happens.
designated. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Captain Hoare's home,
That was designated by the board, plus it's on the National Register of
Yes.
Historic Places.
really doesn't, I mean, it's deteriorating and nothing, but
And we did
then it's protected, but it's,
but there's no requirement for
well,
somebody
they
to
can't,
spend
no one can
millions
come in
to
and knock
save
it
it.
down,
If
but then
a hurricane can knock
nothing
it down.
is protecting it from deteriorating.
Well, the
Or is it-
idea is that the property owner just can't knock it down without getting approval
Yeah.
from this board. But there's no requirement for them to spend a lot of money to keep it at a certain level of, yeah. Now, there are some state and federal grants that help people protect and preserve structures from further deterioration, but Collier County government doesn't have a grant program for that. So really, it's the property owner's
for the state.
responsibility to maintain it. And any changes they propose to the site has to come to this preservation board. And you will approve what they're trying to do to the site. And if you disagree, you will not issue what's called a certificate of appropriateness. But if you agree with what they're changing or doing won't affect the historic quality of the site, then you can issue that approval. Then they can go through the next permitting process step. The county staff will not process, say, a site development plan or building permit on a site that's locally designated historic without preservation board weighing in and saying, we agree with these changes or we don't agree. That's one level of protection.
Oh, I know that the Bank of the Everglades was earmarked $3 million by the county through the county. I mean, I guess the state, yes, for, I suppose they're going to work on their substructure there. And
There's jurisdictional issues too with the city of Everglades. They're their own jurisdiction, municipality. So technically, we don't have authority to tell the city what they can or can't do. Some of those buildings are maybe owned by the county in Everglades City, but the local zoning takes place and precedent over there. We did have Roberts Ranch Historic Site designated by the board as historic. And Amanda brought in copies of the plans of their proposed improvements to that historic site. And this preservation board reviewed those changes and found them in keeping with the historic nature of that site and approved those. Once that approval was given, Amanda and her team could go to the next step of actually hiring a builder to make those changes.
Alrighty, so there's no other comments?
One other thing, I think if we can zoom in on archaeological sites and how they're marked.
So where did you want me to go?
Anywhere we find this dot.
Yeah, we'll go back to tomorrow.
When a site is designated historic by the Board of County Commissioners, these maps are updated to show these designations. There is a resolution that's created by the Board of County Commissioners, and that resolution designated a site historic is kept with the clerk of courts. And we also have those in our records room here. So anybody doing research on some of these locally designated sites, we have the records of those. We also have a database, a computer database. We call it CityView, and any historic designation application or any rezone application where the historic sites are involved, that's all maintained in our computer database. So any studies that come out of the certified archaeologist report, those copies are kept in our CityView database system. So, 20 years from now, if there's an issue on one of these development sites, we can go back and find the original cultural assessment prepared just to make sure everything is consistent with what those recommendations were. We have found one with this.
Yeah, I'm you guys looked at this a few months ago as the Williams Farm Residential Planned Unit Development, and that one had two historical sites on it.
Archaeological sites, the circles.
Yeah, are you talking about the red or?
Let's zoom in so we can see.
Yeah, sorry, this is very, very slow.
What I'm trying to show is our probability maps also showed existing known archaeological sites. So and those don't appear to be it. The cross hatching, it means typically that area has been studied by an archaeologist in the past and they did their own report.
Yeah, that's according to this, it's in a historic site, and there were two of them on there. But Ray, did you want an historic structure was the
No.
store?
Those little archaeological sites. If you go into the coastal area, there's probably a lot more there. Yeah, just a slow computer. The point I was trying to make is when the information from the Florida master site file, that information is, and the location of these existing sites are noted on our probability maps. So when we do a rezone or subdivision plat, and we look at it and compare that property where this subdivision is going, and then that, and if there's an existing site, then that requires that subdivision before it can proceed to get a certified archaeologist. I just wanted to show you where those known archaeological sites are. And every 5 or 10 years, we will work with a state preservation board to update our maps. And we did that a few years ago, working with the state preservation office to get updates to our map. No, just. I would think somewhere in the coastal area, we should be able.
Really informed.
Yeah, so the idea is that when the Board of County Commissioners looks at a future development, we want to convey to the board if there are archaeological resources or historic structures that are on a site that we don't allow the developer to demolish or destroy or alter those things without going through a process to determine if that's appropriate or not. So this is one way, having these maps, or it's everyone in this building. When a development proposal comes in, whether it's an environmental review or transportation review or zoning, planning and zoning review, we want to make sure that the property we're dealing with is clean and that it doesn't have archaeological sites or historic sites. And if it's in these yellow areas, those are areas of high probability. So that's where we have to be cautious and make that applicant or developer go through the steps to hire an archaeologist to study that property. And I'm not sure our maps are working fast enough to really show you the sites that have already been known.
Yeah, I'm zooming into downtown Naples because I
It's
know
just
that
very
one
slow.
has historical sites. Just further in there.
Anywhere you see that red dot? What is that?
That one.
Yeah. So always go this way.
It might be the connection.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, that's not it either.
Yeah, that's another historic site.
Well, without playing with it more, I think you get the idea though. Where there are known sites, it's designated with a solid circle and it has the Florida master site file number next to it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to pull one up on the map easily, given the delay with the programming. And but that's the idea. I haven't looked for a while. Yeah, it's, I think they get the idea though. Yeah. Any questions? So, I don't know if we have any cultural assessments on the horizon. The county is one of the faster growing counties in Florida, and the push eastward is encroaching into these rural areas. Typically, the archaeological sites are along streams and rivers or marshlands. That's where original Aboriginal Indians and natives primarily had their fish camps. Unfortunately, in Collier County, those were the first areas to be developed in Florida. And that was prior to our Historic Preservation Board being formed, which I think was recreated at around 1991 or 92. Our board was created. And we are also went through the extra qualification process to be deemed by the state of Florida as a certified local government, meaning we can bypass, we don't necessarily need to coordinate with the Florida Bureau of Historic Preservation. By being a certified local government, Collier County can initiate historic designations and National Register designations. If we weren't, we would have to have the state of Florida do those things for us.
Mhm.
Most of the structures and that are in the book, are they privately owned? They're publicly owned? A mix?
Yes, our historic guide has a list of structures that have historic significance of some level. And if you read through them, some of them will have a note that it's been designated historic by the Board of County Commissioners. And if you look further, there's some that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So, for example, number 6 on the book is Captain John F. Hoare House on what is that? Plantation Island. Anyways, that has both a local county, Collier County logo on there. That means it has a county designation, and then it also has a National Register designation. So that particular site has both locally and on the National Register. The Margood Park I don't see any of them, so that doesn't seem to be locally designated. I thought we did that one. Yeah. Bank of Everglades and Everglades City, they went through the process and had it designated on the National Register. So there are a lot of sites in the county that are on the National Register. And I think this book identifies all the sites on the National Register. But there are sites that could be designated in the future, such as Margood, if it wasn't already. We could work with Amanda. I think that's a county-owned property maintained by the museum.
Since all of you have your books, if I could have you go to page 12, number 21, Ted Smallwood store. On the GIS on the screen, I zoomed in. It says HD.
Yeah,
If you look at the monitors, it says HD.
on top of the building.
Yeah, that's Ted Smallwood's store. That's 360. Can't read. Marnie.
Mamie.
Yeah, 360 Mamie Street.
Right, and those of you may still remember when developers came in and tore up that road to the historic road to that Smallwood store. And that was a really worrisome thing. And then, and we actually had to go to the
So our map, by having the HD, that alerts anybody
Yeah.
working on a project in the area that Smallwood Store is on the National Register and the locally designated historic. And the property next to this site is the one you're referring to. That was the property owner there had some plans to redevelop the site. But without permits, he went in and dug up the road leading into there, and there was a lawsuit. And turns out it wasn't a private road; it was county maintained road. So he had to rebuild that road back into its.
That it
But he
led to
also,
the
I
post
think-
office, you had to prove that it was a
Yeah.
county road.
Yeah.
I mean, our historic road.
One of the nice things with our computer database system is we can flag certain properties when we think there's an ongoing issue. That means if somebody just says, I'm going to lay low for a while, it's in the computer system as like, you have an issue here, and we haven't been resolved yet. So we can flag properties when there's an ongoing, either a code case or a situation where the restoration has to be done. In that case, that road had to be reconstructed. There was some excavation of some archaeological sensitive area, but I don't believe anything of significance was determined to be found in the rubble that they had dug up. But they were required to hire a certified archaeologist to
But
study what
that
they did.
threatened the whole Smallwood store because their access to the
Yeah.
store was destroyed.
Yeah,
I mean, that was a big issue. I mean,
I did receive word maybe a few months ago that this property owner may have sold the property, so we're investigating to see if the new property owner has any plans for that site and alert them to the issue of the historic qualities there. Yeah.
those-
Yeah.
Although it could not happen again because they would not go in there and tear up a road that is now designated.
The interesting part of Chuckalesky is that all of the island is basically a probability area and has archaeological sites scattered throughout. It would not be able to develop now due to the historic preservation regulations in place now, but when this island was primarily developed in the 60s and 50s, we had no rules. And so all those archaeological mounds were dug up. County itself in the state building the East Trail dug up a lot of archaeological sites because it made good road bed. So that's one of the nice things of the process today. The county or state can't build a road without hiring a certified archaeologist to make sure their corridor where they're building the roads don't impact archaeological sites. Yes, that's all we had to present today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bellows, for your presentation. I can say you and your colleague are a big cog of the county government. And next will be public comments, and definitely no other comments by any of the members.
None.
None. Maybe we should pick our next meeting date for March, no, February. Let's see. Calendar.
Looks like it would be February 17th.
Yep. Yes.
In this building.
All righty. And next would be. Like,
Are we ready to adjourn?
yes.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I second it. Aye.
Aye. That was another thing we used to do. We